or I've been around for a couple of years, but just like a lot of people, I'm just finding out about you guys this year with the
Yeah.
Sleep When I'm Dead and Hellbound going crazy on Octane. And I listen to Octane every day.
Yeah.
Uh, you guys have been around for a couple of years, got a couple albums out, but I feel like things are different right now. Things just seem bigger right now,
Yeah.
which is the case for a lot of bands where a lot of bands are blowing up. It's a very exciting time in rock and roll.
Yeah.
Talk about the atmosphere around Autumn Kings right now.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because we've been a band since 2015 is when we started,
Yeah.
as soon as I left high school. And as we all know in rock, it is a grind until it's not. And even when you're set in terms of financially and have a loyal, dedicated fan base around the world that can provide you a living and is loving to you, it's still a grind. The lifestyle is challenging. And
Yeah.
for us, being from a place like Detroit, which has unbelievable rock roots, it isn't quite a music industry hub the way it was in the Motown era, let's say.
Yeah.
Really Nashville and LA and a little bit of New York and London, England that are the hubs. And so we've had to fight extra hard to get that recognition. And so it's been nothing short of crafting our music tirelessly for years and years, navigating teams, working with the band, and hustling and cold calling when we had nobody on our team representing us except for ourselves, just young, naive 18-year-olds who thought we could build this thing. And so for years and years, it was this seemingly just tiny, imperceptible steps that were hopefully getting us toward where we wanted to go. And just as we thought we were getting over that proverbial hump onto the other side, of the bridge, all the momentum got swept from our feet with COVID. And it, in a lot of ways, brought us back to ground zero, other than the fact that we had really refined our writing and production chops. That couldn't be taken away from us no matter what happened. But as far as on the live front, especially, and just as we were about to build a team, it just felt like everything was taken from us. And it became this illogical, solely emotional choice to continue to push forward, even though we had many peers who were around our level at that time who just came up with too many good, plausible reasons not to keep going. So a lot of people quit, in 2020 and 2021. But we kept going, we stuck it out. And then during that time in the pandemic, that the only thing we could control is how much we practiced and got better at writing and producing. And we feel coming out of those few years that were tough for everybody, not just in music, we had a renewed sense of mastery over the craft. Not to say that we've got it all figured out, but a feeling that we could repeatedly do great songs. And I think getting out of COVID, getting the touring stuff back, we just did a tour in Asia last year, building our team of management, lawyers, that sort of thing, and having an army behind us, combined with our increased skill set, has led us to this point where everything is lining up perfectly and it's all happening at once. And overnight, all these people are noticing us. And as you mentioned, Octane is it's a really interesting story about Octane. Is I'm a millennial. I don't know if you are. I'm a 1996 year I'm born.
I'm
Uh,
87. So yeah.
Nice. And
Yeah.
so my people around my age and our band's age didn't put as much emphasis on radio. It was
Yeah.
about internet and streaming, right?
Yeah.
So I was completely blind and unaware of the significant impact that Octane has even in 2024.
Really?
So yeah, so when our management told us, you guys are getting added to Octane, this is a big deal. I was like, okay, cool. And then I did a little bit of digging and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Number one,
Yeah.
the playlists are amazing. Number two, that station has such a loyal, dedicated fan base because for such a long period, they've effectively curated amazing new playlists of music that fans are so glad they were introduced to. And it's still that filter, even though people can discover it all through Spotify. Who wants to sift through 100,000 songs released every single day,
Yeah,
right?
I can't stand Spotify. Now my podcast is on Spotify, so for that, love Spotify.
Yeah, yeah,
Music,
yeah.
oh my God, for music, I debate and go off on my non-industry, like just my fan friends all the time. Like, get off of Spotify, guys. Like, just
So
yeah.
yeah, and so Octane has acted as that filter, and the folks at Octane, what I love about Vincent, who is the program director there, is he he thrives on being the guy who gave bands a chance to succeed. And when he adds stuff, that holds so much weight to people. Not only has it exposed us to the proper fans that need to hear Autumn King's music and message, but it's gotten people to look at us. It's like a kid wants to get a job in corporate America and he goes, I went to Harvard. And they're like, oh, come on right in. Right. And it's like, we're on Octane. That
Yes.
says something, right? And
Yeah.
so that all of that has brought us here today with Sleep When I'm Dead, Hellbound, the Octane success, and a lot of
Yeah.
exciting stuff in the works.
Yeah. Man, like it's to the point where like Octane DJs are almost like just as popular as the bands are now. Like
Right.
everyone knows Katie Babb, Shannon Guns, Jose May, like they're just as popular as the band, honestly, sometimes more popular. Like they're emceeing Sonic Temple and Louder Than Life for a weekend. Like,
Incredible.
it's insane. And like, there's so many bands since it really picked up during the pandemic in 2020, where like bands like Outlier and You Guys and so many bands, like, that's the only reason I know who a lot of bands are, is because I
Right.
hear them on Octane and I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And then you got bands like Nothing More who had been around for a few years and it catapulted them to the level that they needed to get to. So, I mean, for bands like you, it is so cool to
It
see
is.
things coming together because, like you said, during the pandemic, none of us knew if this thing that we love, which is concerts and music, was going to be around in the
Right.
same format, which it isn't. But, so many bands, younger bands that I've spoken to over the last few months, especially, there was something about the pandemic that when it ended, they really kicked things into a different gear business wise, which you just touched on that. Was
Yeah.
that because, we had that time where it's like, this might get taken away from me again. And if it gets taken away from me again, I'm going down swinging because
Right.
if it's going away, I'm going to say I gave it all I had. Was that kind of the mindset you guys had coming out of it?
Definitely. I mean, that was absolutely part of it. I think another thing that the pandemic did for younger bands like us is it forced us to take control of all areas of our career rather than solely focusing on the creative, which is always the most important thing and the thing we spend the vast majority of time on. But it's also being able to know where you're getting money from so that you can keep paying for great production and get the great mixes and continue making great music and buy a van and tour. And a lot of that actually does come from streaming it once you get to the level that we're at. You can actually make a living doing this. So part of it was just doubling down on releasing music and marketing it to the fans in a way that they would feel it connects with them on a deep level and moves them and changes their life. And once we do that, then they reward us by buying our merch and streaming our music. And so we just started taking those pillars of our career more seriously. And then beyond just the pandemic, I don't know if this is going to sound cliche or not, but I just love music so much that even when the pandemic happened, I said to myself, no matter what, I'm gonna do music. I don't care if even if the band got taken away, which is my pride and joy since I was 18, I'm 27 now. I would go busk on the street in downtown Detroit. Like I don't care. I just music is in me. I'll go play at the bar. I'll go play acoustic guitar at the bar. Like it doesn't matter. And all the goats like Ed Sheeran, John Mayer, and Lars from Metallica, like, these guys, the money is just a byproduct of pursuing excellence. They don't give a crap about the money, dude. It's like
Yes.
they could be making like 1/100th of what they're making as long as they can feed themselves and their families. Like they're doing it, and that's how we knew there's going to be an endpoint to the pandemic because if you look at history, pandemics have happened in the past and they
Yep.
don't last forever. They can change the trajectory of your career, and that's really scary, especially for us. Like, if you're our parents' age and you're already sort of established in your life and have your flow and routine, you're not as affected. My dad loved the pandemic because he stayed home and he worked from home the whole time. He's like made some
Same.
relationships better because people were like, oh, I get to spend more time with my family who I don't see enough and not commute. For us, it was like, dude, our hopes and dreams are taken away from us for an unknown period. So it's harder,
Right.
but yeah, but ultimately the love for music was just going to drive us forward, and we had no doubt about that.
Yeah. The one thing I feel like I'm one of the only publications or interviewers that didn't stop in 2020, just like you guys didn't stop in 2020. Like I was
Right.
still reviewing and doing interviews every day, actually more because literally nothing else to do. But like some bands' best music was released in 2020, but people don't necessarily remember it. But there's some great music put out during the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
Um, And it was just such a crazy time. And the two things that kept me going was new music and professional wrestling were the two things that kept me going during the
Yeah.
pandemic, because those two things, everyone thinks it stopped. It really didn't stop,
Right.
and if you knew where to look, you could find a concert. It just may not be who you want to see, but you could find them. It just wasn't the same.
Yeah.
But coming out of the pandemic, it's now been what, 2 years since the last record officially released, which was Book of the Broken. We're 2 years past that, two new singles out, killing it. Let's talk about the new music that you guys have out, which I think is really cool the way you're doing this. Both Sleep When I'm Dead and Hellbound have multiple different videos out.
Right. Right.
With Hellbound, you got the official video, the AI video, and the lyric video. Sleep When I'm Dead, you've got the AI video, the lyric video, and then an animated video as well.
Right.
Um, what made you guys do? Because videos take so much work, and I can't imagine the amount of work that putting an AI video together with that type of end product must
Yeah.
take. How much time went into the music video side of these songs? Is you got
Yeah.
6 videos for 2 songs, which is automatically more hits, more money, baby,
It's more moolah. It is more moolah, man. Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, it's interesting that AI has really emerged at the forefront of just
Yeah.
our society. And for all the concerns that people have, one of the great things is the ability to make these really captivating, unique visuals. And we were just scrolling on YouTube one day. Joe and I actually were taking a break from writing, and we saw this guy. His name was AI YouTube Music Videos, and he was doing these AI videos of Rob Zombie songs and Five Finger Death Punch songs for free just to get his work out there. He would just make them on his own. And we looked at each other, we're like, dude, this stuff is incredible. So we just hit this guy up cold on YouTube. We're like, dude, we love your work. Do you want to cook something up for us for Sleep When I'm Dead? And he said, hell yeah. And his name is Justin Everest. He's based in Montreal, in Quebec, and he just does this thing from his house. And so we would do a bunch of Zoom meetings like the way you and I are chatting right now and hone in on the kind of visuals and the direction that we wanted to relay to the world. And Joe loves anime and Japanese anime shows. And I've done some work, with Japanese anime music. I've produced some Japanese anime
Okay.
songs outside of Autumn Kings. And the imagery paired with the music is something that's always captivated us about that style. Not that we want to become a Japanese anime band, but if we could take some of the visuals that we found to be so captivating and channel that in the form of an AI video, we thought that could be pretty cool. And that's what we did with Sleep When I'm Dead. And it's also just giving the fans enough different angles and perspectives from a marketing and visual standpoint of the music that we want to put out, because different things resonate with different people. Like we heard from a faction of our fan base saying, I don't really care for the AI video, but I love the song. But then they
Yeah.
see the lyric video and then they're hooked. So to be able to give different flavors for different segments of our base, I think is a really helpful and useful thing to make sure that we strike a chord with our audience. And it worked great for Sleep When I'm Dead. And we figured if the shoe fits, wear it. And so we applied the same thing for Hellbound.
Yeah. I love the music video for Hellbound. Just like,
Yeah,
that's the one where you guys are in the car driving down through the country, right?
right. Yes.
And like, that looks like it was just a fun video to shoot. And then you've obviously got the part of the video where you guys are actually playing the song as well, and just the different settings going back and forth is really cool. But it just
Yeah.
like the scenes where you guys are just cruising down the highway in the country, that just looks like we've all done that, where we're
Right.
just cruising down, top down, windows down, music blaring, rocking out, and nobody's watching. If they are, that's fine too. How
Right.
much fun was that video to do?
It was the best. We put it together over a couple weeks. We had the concept, the location. The car was, I think it was a 1983 Canadian brand. The name is slipping
Like,
me right now, but it's this very unique hookup for a car that our video director got from a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy who was just glad to lend the car for a music video. But more importantly, what that video was, it was a reflection of the camaraderie that we share in this band. Joe and I have been writing songs together for 9 years, and that guy is, for a lead singer, lead singers, they can be a little crazy. Joe is the least ego, nicest, easygoing, coolest dude that I have a privilege of playing in a band with. And what's really interesting is you see a lot more solo artists stepping to the forefront in music because it's just easier. You have
Yeah.
less, it's not a four-way marriage like a lot of
Yeah.
rock groups are, right? But
Yeah.
for us, we have this special camaraderie, and I would never, ever, I've been tempted to do solo projects,
Mhm.
but it's not as fun. There's something about the camaraderie of being in a band where you can get three people in a car like you did in the Hellbound video and just cruise and have fun with the boys. And oh, and by the way, we do this for a living and we're making music. There is literally nothing like it. Even when we started off and we were eating crap, sleeping on hardwood floors, playing to high schools in Canada in 2016, the the feeling of conquest and adventure with the boys trumps any money. Like when we're on road trips, as a lot of bands could probably attest to, you have these either deep life talks or you just talk about everything under the sun. And we often talk about, what would you do for $1 billion? And I thought about it, and everyone's joking around, saying funny stuff. And I'm like, okay, let's say I had $1 billion right now. What would change in my life? Literally nothing, because
You
I'm
just
not
have
motivated by
$1 billion.
right. I'd have $1 billion, but I would my actions, like what I would do on a day to day, would literally not change. And I know people will say, "Oh, are you kidding me? I'd go get a yacht. I'd go do this." I'm like, I play music, I write songs, I tour to fans. I would be doing the exact same thing. Maybe we could do bigger budget videos, or we can go on private jets everywhere. But
Yeah.
I don't care because that's not a part of my value system. What is? It's like that Hellbound video that night when we were just cruising in the car with the boys, looking good, feeling good. It's like, bro, we made it. That's it. Is the best to answer your question.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
love that. That's just fucking perfect.
Yeah.
Um, one thing I've been scrolling through face, you guys do social media really well.
Thank you.
Yes, one thing that I think is really cool is Hellbound is one of the videos reels you guys put up said it's about victim mentality.
Yeah.
Um, what is it about that subject that was really important for you guys to write a song about? Because it's a banger song, but when you look at the lyrics, it's heavy.
Right. Yeah. I appreciate you observing and noticing that. And so firstly, I'll touch on that dichotomy I find is really compelling because it's like comedians. Comedians stretch the bounds of what society accepts as free speech and truth. But because they can deliver it in a way that's laced with humor, you will be more receptive to the message than if some politician was saying it in a serious tone of
Very
voice,
true.
right? And as an artist, it's a similar thing where we can touch on these deep, profound concepts, but if the delivery is happy, fun, and upbeat the way Hellbound is, it will make people more receptive to the subject matter than if we were saying it in a preachy or condescending way. That's not the way to get the point across. And what I saw, not to keep going back to the pandemic, we're obviously past it, but it is important to talk about because it leads us to where we are today. And
We
then
need to remember it.
we have to remember it and it can
Yeah.
guide us into the future. And so what happened is we just saw a lot of keyboard warriors and a lot of people complaining on social
Yeah.
media before they were proactively taking steps to resolve the things that they wanted to see resolved. And if you look at the Autumn Kings brand, and this is something that a message I've always passed on to our team is don't complain on social media under any set of circumstances.
Mhm.
You do not complain, right? And so nobody on our team, if you see us on Facebook or Instagram, we don't complain about stuff because I just don't find that's good energy to put out into the world.
Yep.
And I think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when people start hypnotizing themselves into believing that they have illnesses or issues or problems that they don't have, or maybe they had, but then by speaking about it and going on and on and on excessively, you're expanding it too much. Not to say to bury your problems or stuff them, because you must talk. If you got to do your therapy or if you have to talk to a social support network, that is good. That's healthy, and Autumn Kings encourages that. But what we don't encourage, and what we see a lot of in the rock world, to be very candid, is people glamorizing mental illness and glamorizing these negative emotions. When if you look at the 70s and the 80s, the rock music then, it was generally very happy, actually. It was not the way it is now. It got really depressing. And it's easy to be relatable talking about how depressed you are. It's so easy to
Yeah.
do. But to us, we started feeling like that was low-hanging fruit. So it's okay to have some songs like that because we are human beings and we should be able to feel and express the full spectrum of human emotions. But to indulge in that excessively, I don't think is a productive thing for anybody. And considering yourself a victim is simply an identity construct, right? Like Autumn Kings touches on the heavy, dark subject matter, but we're actually very enthusiastic, optimistic guys because I don't adopt the mindset of somebody who is feeling terrible all the time. I don't think that's a healthy way to look at life. So we look at it like, dude, it's gonna suck no matter what. Like we're in the van, we're grinding. This is going to suck. It's going to be hard on relationships. It's going to be stressful. We will feel anxious at times. We will feel depressed at times. But what is the most useful frame of mind going forward? And it is not victim mentality. And so on Hellbound, the first half of the song is touching on those emotions you feel when you feel helpless. And then once the rap comes on the bridge, it starts with, this is the moment where I wake up, cut out the victim mentality. I don't want to see negativity play out. And it's about the turnaround when you snap out of it, because it really is a lot of times you snap out of it. You wake up and go, I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of being pissed off. Like, why don't we just turn this around? It's not
Yeah.
always that easy. I don't want to downplay the severity of what people go through, but we just think it's more useful to be rationally optimistic. That's kind of how I describe it.
Yeah. I love the way you talked about doing a very heavy, serious subject, but in a fun, upbeat, like delivery. Really reminds me of, Bullet by Hollywood Undead or A Little Bit Off by Five Finger Death Punch, where it's like you don't even necessarily realize what those songs are about. Like Bullet by Hollywood Undead is like, oh, this song's great. And then you read, I'm like, oh, like
Right.
oh God, like, and
Right.
then it makes you think, you know. One thing that
Totally.
I think is really, really cool is the landscape of what's popular in rock music with fans has changed astronomically since you guys started.
Yeah.
2015, 16, there weren't really a lot of bands popular doing the style that you do, combining the rap elements with rock. And now you've got so many, it blew up. You've got I Prevail, From Ashes to New, but also those bands are very authentic, which is what really reminds me of you guys remind me of that as well.
Right.
What has this year been like for you guys? Because this so far I feel like has been the biggest year you guys have had commercially. And
Yeah.
you guys are fitting right in there with a lot of really heavy hitting bands that fans love. And I feel like that's one reason fans are gravitating to you guys so much now. And things are just clicking and the dots are connecting right now. It's just, we're off to the races.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's really interesting, and it's hard to know exactly why this type of music with the I Prevails and From Ashes to News is really striking a chord more than ever. And it's actually something I've noticed as streaming services have become more popular, and the CD and the record has pretty much died out, and streaming has replaced it. I've noticed there's been a resurgence in some of the bands I loved growing up, even like Silverstein and We Came as Romans, that are bigger
Yes.
now. They're bigger now than they've ever been. And I'm sitting here asking myself, why? What is it? And I can't say for sure, and this might just be anecdotal, my own personal observations, but what I think is when you're a band, being able to execute a live show is such a unique thing versus that of a solo artist who is just playing to backing tracks, which can be its own special, unique experience too. But for me, I'm a rock guy growing up. Metallica is my favorite band of all time, followed by Nickelback
Yeah.
and Rise Against. And these are all bands who cut their teeth as a rock and roll band, guitar, bass, drums, and vocals, right? And then the production came after, but the fundamentals were rock and roll. And because that concert experience, I think is the most special concert experiences there is on earth. As you know, in the mid 2010s, as you mentioned, when we started, that kind of music was not as popular. I think what might have happened is people realized the impact and power of the rock show, right? And I will say, and I'll say this to my fellow rock people, I actually felt there was a period of time where the songwriting and the strength of the songs was not as strong in rock as it was in some other genres.
Yes. Absolutely.
R&B and hip hop, people weren't as focused on writing memorable hooks. And hooks isn't supposed to be this word that means you're pandering a song to be catchy for the radio, but it means
Right.
like "Carry On My Wayward Son" by Kansas, old school's hooky song, as hooky as it gets. CCR, hooky. Oasis, hooky. Battery by Metallica. Like if you just stripped all the thrash metal out of it and diagnose the vocals and the lyric and the way it played with the music. Or Enter Sandman. If you took Enter Sandman, all the metal elements away, and you converted it into a country song, I believe it could still be a hit because they nailed the hook, they nailed the song. And I think what's happening now is people are in rock, people are writing stronger songs, and the internet has sort of equalized the opportunity for rock artists because we've always been the underdog in terms of what gets the broadest commercial mass appeal. Like you can count almost on two hands since 2000 what bands were able to really cross over. And that would be like Nickelback, Boulevard of Broken Dreams by Green Day. Like you have those rare ones that cross over,
Foo
but most of
Fighters.
them, Foo Fighters a huge one too, like with Learn to Fly. Linkin Park had a few, Creed, back in the day. But for bands like I Prevail and Autumn Kings, it's quite the obstacle to cross over into pop. But when you have the internet, you don't need to chase that thing as much, and you can reach more people that way. And as yeah, call me a crazy delusional optimist, but I think the world, despite all the turbulence it's going through, I think generally speaking gets better for most people. And in that line of thinking, as more people get widespread access to internet in places like Africa and other developing areas in the world, they have access to streaming, right? And then they discover bands like I Prevail and they discover bands like Autumn Kings. And I
Yes.
think that's a big part of why that's coming back. So I do think it's many reasons,
Yeah.
but
That you bring up a good point. It was like 2009, 10, 11, even 12. Like it's a weird time in rock music. Even bands like Korn, the albums just weren't good. You had maybe one, two good songs on it, and it's just like our favorites just phoning it in. Like,
right,
what's going on? And then over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, like it's back. I think it's become authentic again. People are writing stuff that's real. And
right,
it was going on even a little bit before the pandemic. It was starting to pick up, but now it's almost like I was talking to Daniel from Nothing More about it a few weeks ago. Like almost like a renaissance and resurgence and a rebirth in rock and roll's like popularity. And it's not even nostalgia because a lot of the bands that we loved back then, we still love, but there's so many more newer bands that are popping up that people are falling in love with. And it's just, you guys are writing music that people can connect with. And that's what they want. People want to connect, they want to feel. And we can tell when it's not coming from a real place. And you guys are obviously writing music that is about something important that people want to connect. They already feel it. They just want to feel like somebody else does. And that's
right.
what's great about you guys.
Well, thank you. I appreciate all that. And you saying that just sparked my thinking again. I think one of the other reasons, because you had asked earlier, what is it about the music and where you guys are at now where it's connecting commercially at a way higher level than it has in your
Yeah.
past? And I think another thing that you raised a good point about honest songwriting is that when I was 18, I had a relatively very good childhood. Okay. I grew up middle class. And then as I got older, my dad ended up doing really well and I became upper middle class. And this is not what I'm saying here is not a popular narrative. A lot of people
Right.
who grew up the way I grew up, they try to mask that. They're almost ashamed that they didn't have a horrible upbringing because it
Mhm.
doesn't add to your street cred or
Yeah.
relatability. I'm not going to sit here and say that. I grew up middle class and then I grew up upper middle class as I got into early adulthood, let's say, before I officially moved out and got out on my own. But what happened is between the time I was 18 starting the band and coming out of that COVID pandemic, I had a lot more real life experience to draw from. And with this newest music, it's so funny, man, because I started off playing Guitar Hero 3. That is what got me into music. Okay.
Nice.
Complete nerd, outcast in school, couldn't talk to girls, had a small group of friends. Guitar Hero 3 was my escape from all that. And I became concerningly good at it. Like I was playing Before I Forget by Slipknot backwards. Like I'd memorized the
Oh my
five
God.
freak show, like not just wild, right? And then thankfully I had good sense and due to my parents' influence, why don't you
Right.
take that video game skill and turn it into a real instrument? So I learned guitar and drums when I was 12. And then when we started the band in 2015, I was looking at songwriting and music through the lens of guitar first, song second. And so the paradigm was guitar first, song second. And then over the years, it slowly turned into songs first, guitar work second. So if you hear some of our older songs like Aliens and If I Leave Today, these are guitar records. It's guitar first, the vocals sort of act to serve the core guitar parts.
Okay.
Once 20, once 2019 hit, we really focused on writing more relatable, songs with beautiful, unforgettable melodies. And that became the focus first. And whatever the guitar was doing was to serve this amazing song. And this is something Green Day did once they started writing the songs like Basket Case and She and then American Idiot. They were writing songs first, and then they worried about the guitar
Yeah.
riffs and all things second. And so what's happened now, whereas we used to write guitar first, song second, now the way we judge whether or not we're going to ultimately release a song is, are we touching on a profound truth that people have living in their subconscious that they haven't been able to quite articulate or say it? And if we're able to touch on that message, like cutting out the victim mentality, and have people listen and go, oh my God, he's speaking exactly my life. I didn't even realize like he had the vocabulary and they had the music to really touch on this thing that I was feeling inside me. That is the criteria we use now to decide whether or not we even want to release a song. And so I think having all that life experience now to actually draw from is making our music quote unquote better and stronger, because it's able to strike just a raw, like the raw honesty is striking a chord with people. So I thought that was an important point to make too, that you inspired
Yes.
me to do that too. Yeah.
Well, and just because somebody grows up middle class or upper middle class or even upper class, there's as soon as somebody says they grew up with that background, there's this misconception that, oh, well, there's nothing wrong. Like they've got it made. They don't
Right.
have problems. Everything's great. When in reality, like, no, you still have a lot of the same, deal with the same problems and issues. You're still human. You're still a person.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes it can be worse because people expect you to just be fine because you had a good upbringing. I grew up in a very same thing, middle class, great family, grew
Yeah.
up in the church, very supportive family of everything.
Yeah.
It wasn't until high school and college that I got out on my own where my issues really started to really become a thing because, like you still deal with everyday issues, mental health problems, depression. It's still a thing. It doesn't matter your upbringing, how much money you have, or anything. Like you can have the most supportive family ever and still have those. It's a thing.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
do you remember the maybe not the moment, but when did you realize that this is something that you can do and that you're good at it? How long did that take? Are you still learning? Are you still, getting to that point? Or when did you realize I can do this and I can do it
Yeah.
well?
Yeah, really interesting. So actually, I give credit to my second favorite band of all time, Nickelback. Funny enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I grew up in a
No
city.
hate. No
Yeah.
hate.
No hate, dude. No hate. There's a great softening now. I think people are starting to realize that all the hate was nonsense, and those guys wrote great songs. That's
Their
why
new
they.
stuff is so heavy. These last few records have been,
Oh,
oh my God, they're back.
they're writing bangers. And so I grew up in a city, Windsor, Ontario, right across the border from Detroit.
Yeah.
It's Canadian. And partially why I resonated with Nickelback is that they were Canadian also. But a few things there to unpack. Number one, that band built all of their momentum organically. Came
Yeah.
from a small town in the middle of the province of Alberta, where it was like 3,000 people, no opportunities as far as music goes.
Okay.
Right. And so they moved 12 hours away to Vancouver to get closer to a city where there was some action happening. It was only 2 hours away from that Seattle grunge movement that had started 10 years prior to when they became huge. But they went, I think, $150,000 in debt for their dream. Like they sacrificed it all. And people don't realize what that band did to make their dreams come true. And they were also one of the rare bands, at least as far as I could tell, that didn't get sucked into that trap of sex, drugs, and rock and roll to their detriment. Like I'm sure they, experimented with the mild drugs that many people experiment with,
Or
but nobody got sucked into that circus that chews people up and spits them out and ruins bands, ruins marriages,
Mhm.
ruins people's lives. They were one of the few bands that I could look to as a good model, like a stable model where they were like quote unquote, I use this term very loosely, but like normal-ish guys, like they had their stuff together. I'll just say that. I don't want to use the word normal, but they seemed to have very like principled values on how they went about their career. And so I saw that by watching interviews of Chad Kroger and the band at how they approach things and how it sort of matched my upbringing. Because my parents were like, you can do music. We're scared. We wanted you to be a doctor or a lawyer, but you're telling us you're never going to do that, which I told them I'm never doing that. So if you're going to do music, just be smart and don't fall into those traps. And I
Yeah.
couldn't point to my dad when I was 15 or 16 and I was trying to convince them that this was a viable path. I was really struggling to find artists who didn't have like a massive drug problem or go through this depression where they almost took their life. Like it's scary if you're a parent and your frame is, I went to university and I want my kid to go to university and get a stable job and have a happy, stable life. It's like I can't point to a model of and then Nickelback came. I'm like,
Yeah.
look, there you go. See, they're not like they're normal or they match your ideal of normal. And they are very, very successful. And they
Yeah.
made their own songs. They weren't contrived. They didn't have to go write with 50 people in LA to write a song that catered to the radio. They learned how to write the songs themselves. So watching and absorbing all these things when I was 15 or 16, as crazy as it sounds, gave me the ultimate confidence to pursue a career in music. Now, it was Metallica that, from a technical and creative standpoint, learning James Hetfield's guitar parts taught me that if I can learn Metallica riffs, I can learn pretty much anything, barring some like prog metal or jazz. So that gave me the musical confidence, Metallica, but Nickelback gave me the entrepreneurial confidence and
Yeah.
personal confidence to know I can do this. And when I was 15 years old, I wrote a note to myself, October 14th, 2012, in my physics class. And I wrote it while I was not paying attention to the lecture. And I wrote, I will make it in music. Just watch. Be a little cocky, but I
Oh,
believed it and I still believe it to this day. But I didn't know what it was going to look like at that time. I didn't know if the vehicle was going to be a band or a producer or a mixer or something else on the business side. But I knew I was going to do music from that time when I was inspired by them. And this is what's crazy, man, because now we're those we're those guys to the next generation. And they say
yeah.
it, and you hear it so often, you always appreciate it, but you're like, oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's nice. And then I go on with my day. And then
Yeah.
it's not until I sit back and I go, no, 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 man. You never underestimate the impact you have on people because what that band Nickelback did to me, I bet you if I said it to them, they'd almost not believe it. They'd be like, wow, that's awesome. But like, dude, it viscerally changed the trajectory of my life. I was supposed to go to university and get a regular job as an accountant or something, and seeing their example literally changed the trajectory of my life and will have changed it for the rest of my life thanks to them. And so I attribute a huge part of my confidence and belief that I could do this to them. And yes, to this day, as far as your question of like what continues driving you today, or do you feel like you have any like is there motivation to keep getting better? Now for me, it's like the pursuit of excellence in and of itself is something I look forward to every day because I learned that chasing money ain't gonna make you happy. Like
Yeah.
chasing a better car ain't gonna make you happy. Chasing a different girl ain't gonna make you happy. It's like look here, look at what you got, and go. Am I giving it 100% every day? And am I not being soft? Am I not having victim mentality? Am I having the right frame of mind? If I do that every day, I don't care. Like I can sleep with myself at night.
Yes. And one thing that people that aren't in the industry that we're in don't really understand or don't realize is like you as a band who's popular and having success, you are in a position where you have access to the bands that shaped you and made an impact on your life. So
Right.
you actually have the opportunity to tell those bands personally what they did for you,
Right.
which it's one thing when like fans are like, oh, thank you so much, thank you so, like you said. There's been so many, but my favorite band of all time is Skillet. And
Mhm.
that band, their music literally was a reason that basically their music had a role in saving my life multiple times, kept me going. And so I make sure that every time I interview John from Skillet, I tell him, thank you for saving my life. It's important that I feel like it's important when you meet these people and you interact with them, that you do tell them, like, hey, like, not just thank you. Like, there's a difference between thank you and thank you.
Yeah, right.
Know? And it's a really cool situation that you were in because you can do that.
Yeah.
And God, man, as an 8-year-old kid, who would have ever, if somebody had told you, man, you're going to be in a touring band with multiple hits on radio, streaming, and you're going to be playing these stages, and you're going to be rubbing shoulders, and you're going to meet and hang out with all of these people. Like, there is no way in hell you would have ever believed that this is your life now.
Right.
Like,
pretty amazing how the universe, God, or whatever you believe, I believe in God, amazing what that can do combined with your own effort and your own will, and then just the mystery of life. It's pretty awesome. That's why we maintain that rationally optimistic frame, because I do believe life is awesome, even if you go through really hard stuff. Because what's your alternative? Like, if you don't have this, if you're not here right now in the moment, it's like, what do you
Yeah.
have? Right?
Yeah.
Easy
And
to say.
we call it rationally optimistic, but people that aren't creative, people that aren't in, like, they may sit and look at it and be like, no, there's no way that's rationally optimistic. Like, there's no way. But for us, it's like, no, this is every day. This is life. This is definitely rationally optimistic. And
Yep.
like the being able to sit down with bands and artists and people like yourself who created songs that I love so much every time I hear it on the radio and all that, like, I can't thank you enough for not just doing this interview, but for creating the music and putting so much of yourselves into that music and putting yourselves out there in a way that is vulnerable and having the courage to be able to do that competently.
Oh,
Thank
thank you.
you, because you guys are making a difference in a lot of people's lives, and man, we need more bands like you.
Dude, thank you so much. I really appreciate all that, and it means the world to me. And it's so true when you connect with people at shows beyond just taking a quick selfie and you actually get to talk to them. That's one of my favorite things about shows is getting into the headspace of our fans and figuring out what excites them, what scares them, what's important to them, what makes them really mad. And when you hear the story of like, it's heavy, man, hearing some of the things that people go through. Like I said, I had a pretty privileged upbringing in the sense that I had two parents in the household who didn't impose the religious or political will and gave me space to grow as a human being. Like that is the greatest gift. And when you realize how many people out there have been deprived of that, that didn't have a dad
Yeah,
around, and maybe
yeah.
mom was around, but maybe it was just grandma who raised them, and like the stuff that people have gone through, it's like, oh my God, my fiance and I talk all the time of how thankful we are that both of our parents were around together. Like the divorce rate is what, like 50, 60%. Like we're
Mhm.
lucky, right? And when you
Yeah.
hear the fan stories and they have nobody or anything to turn to, or so they feel, and music is that, it's like that therapy for them, right? And
Yeah.
when you realize how much it's touched them, that is enough fuel to get you through all the hard times or the times when you haven't slept well for 4 or 5 days or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be. It's really, really fulfilling and gratifying.
It is. And I mean, I've been that kid. I had a good upbringing, but still, I was that kid that sat in his room with nothing but a video game and music. And that
Right.
was it. That was my happy place.
Yeah.
When mom and dad split up, I had music.
Yep.
When my wife and I split up, we're back together now. When we split up, it was music. And literally doing stuff like this has literally kept me going. Music is always the constant that everybody has.
Yeah.
Um, but it's been a couple years since the last record came out. The next one I think is going to be record number 3 overall for you guys.
Yeah.
Your web, I looked online, not many tour dates announced right now. So
Yep.
that leads me to think that there's a lot more music coming from you guys this year.
A lot more music coming, and stay tuned because sooner than later, I'll say 99.9% because there's always a chance something falls through, especially
Right.
after the pandemic. We had many long tours announced that fell through. So I don't like to say
Yeah.
anything until it goes through. But looking at fall time across the US
Oh,
between
yes.
between us and your listeners. So
Yes.
yeah, that will be announced sooner than later. And yes, a full record of tunes pretty much produced. Everything's written. This is if you like Sleep When I'm Dead and you like Hellbound, expect sooner than later 11 songs that are along that line, that are again touching on these uncomfortable but necessary human truths, with delivered as a high energy rock package, for the most part. And so lots of new music on the way. Stay tuned. We've got a tune coming out that's the heaviest song we've ever put out, with a heavy metal rock legend. If I said his name, I'm going to get a call from my manager, Jason, and he's going to go, bro, why did you say that? Don't say that. So I won't say it, but he is a legend. I'm pretty sure you guys have interviewed him. I could be wrong, but stay tuned. Most likely in the fall, that'll come out along with a US wide tour. So A lot of
Yes.
exciting stuff in the pipe, man.